A new Wall Street Journal investigation finds that district judges throughout the country have been investing in individual stocks, which is legal, but failing to recuse themselves in cases involving the very companies they're personally invested in. Now, this is not a new problem. I researched this to see if this was an issue maybe a few years ago. Is this something that's been ongoing? And I found New York Times articles dating back to 1999 finding the same issue at play. And again, this is against the law. Federal judges are supposed to recuse themselves if a case comes before them involving a company that they're personally invested in. Now, let me give you the details of this Wall Street Journal report, and got to give them credit where credit is due. This was a fantastic piece of reporting. Judges have improperly failed to disqualify themselves from 685 court cases around the nation since 2010. The jurists were appointed by nearly every president from LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, to Donald Trump. About 2/3 of federal district judges disclosed holdings of individual stocks, and nearly 1 of every 5 who did heard at least one case involving those stocks. So unsurprisingly, if you have some financial interests at play, might have an impact on the rulings you pass down, right? Well, the Wall Street Journal found that when judges participated in such cases, about 2/3 of their rulings, meaning the vast majority of those rulings on motions that were contested, came down, oh wow, in favor of their or their family's financial interests. So let me be clear about something, because the law pertaining to district judges, to federal judges, is actually far more strict than what we see with members of Congress, who are also allowed to invest in individual stocks, but do not have to recuse themselves when deciding on legislation that impacts the companies that they're making decisions on. It's different for judges. So for judges, sure, they're allowed to invest in individual stocks, but they must recuse themselves. Same goes for their family members. So if they have children, or if their spouse is invested in individual stocks, they must still recuse themselves from hearing cases involving the companies they're invested in. So alerted to the violations, 56 of the judges have directed court clerks to notify parties in 329 lawsuits that they should have recused themselves. That means new judges might be assigned, potentially upending rulings. So what I loved about this story was that here you have judges, they make decisions based on the law, they make decisions based on the Constitution. So they should be experts on what the law is, or especially when it has to do with them. But when the Wall Street Journal reached out to them, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. Really? You didn't know you were doing it? You didn't think that there was a conflict of interest there? Considering the fact that you're personally invested in companies that you're now hearing lawsuits about and making decisions on? Okay, not buying it at all, not by a long shot. So what exactly is the law? Nothing bars judges from owning stocks, but federal law since 1974 has prohibited judges from hearing cases that involve a party in which they, their spouses, or their minor children have a legal or equitable interest, however small. The law and the Judicial Conference of the US, which is the federal court's policy-making body, require judges to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. Doesn't seem like they've cared too much about avoiding the appearance of a conflict. Certainly not. So again, what's incredible is how these judges pretend like they don't know what the law is or what their obligations are. The Journal identified 36 conflicts by one judge in Colorado, R. Brooke Jackson. The cases involved or included Apple, Chevron, Eli Lilly, a pharmaceutical company, Facebook, General Electric, Home Depot, Honeywell. Wow, this guy, expansive stock portfolio. Good for him. Johnson & Johnson, JP Morgan, Pfizer, and Wells Fargo. And when he was reached by phone, Judge Jackson said he had no idea which stocks he owns because a money manager handles them. Okay, stop right there, come back to me. I'm so sick of that argument, okay? You hear it from members of Congress, it's money, okay? It's money, it's their money. They know what's happening with their money. It's the only thing people care about in this system, okay? They know what's happening with their money. By the way, I know nothing about stocks, nothing, okay? I don't know how to personally invest. I don't know, it terrifies me. Guess what? I hired someone for the first time in my life this year to deal with it. And you know what I do? I check that account every day. I know I shouldn't, I know I'm not supposed to, but you know why? It's because it's money. It's about your future, it's about your savings. You wanna know what's going on. I don't believe for a second that a member of Congress doesn't check on how their stock portfolio is doing. Okay, because it's being managed by a third party or whatever. Get out of here. Same with these judges. What a garbage excuse. Let me give you more though. He said that because he doesn't know, he couldn't have a conflict of interest. Oh, how convenient. Told he was required to know under the law, he said, that's news to me. No, homeboy's a federal judge, okay? He's a federal judge. This news to me, I didn't know what the law was. Convenient that you didn't know what the law was when it had to do with your obligations as a federal judge. And so I guess later he realized, maybe that wasn't the right quote to give to the Wall Street Journal as they're doing this investigative report. So later he told the judge, I never really paid much attention to it. I have preferred to stay unknowledgeable about it. Later he wrote a 21-page letter to the Wall Street Journal apologizing and stating that he's gonna take action. He's gonna provide the clerk with a list of his investments to ensure that there are no conflicts of interest in any of the cases he hears in the future. But he broke the law, and he's not the only one, okay? Dozens of these judges have done this, have been doing this, and I don't know, I mean, if you break the law as an ordinary American, do you get to just tell, prosecutors? Do you tell the cops? Do you tell judges like, oh, I didn't know it was against the law to strangle my partner, but I guess I'm okay. I guess I don't have to face any consequences for it because I just didn't know it was against the law. How convenient, I didn't know. No, ignorance of the law, which I'm not even buying in this case with these judges, is not a defense, it's just not. So I wanna know, what are the consequences for these judges? Because all these cases are gonna be, basically they have to go through the system again. Because there's this massive conflict of interest that is not fair, certainly to the plaintiffs or whoever is not part of the corporation that these judges are actually invested in. So again, he wrote this 21-page letter apologizing to them, saying that he's taking action. He also said that he would have, if he had known, he would have recused himself from 36 cases. Later he said, I'm embarrassed that I did not properly understand and apply the stock ownership rule. Being informed of what could be viewed as an ethical violation, it's illegal, okay? Ethics is one thing, the law is another, this is illegal. Even a technical one is no fun. And by the way, this has been going on and on. The more things change, the more they stay the same, because here's a headline from the New York Times in September of 1999. Judges ruled on firms in their portfolios. The law's been in place since the 1970s. So when there are no consequences, when there is this two-tier justice system that tells certain people you get to break the law and there are no consequences for you, they're gonna keep breaking the law. And that's what's happening with these judges. In fact, in 2014, the Center for Public Integrity found that 59% of all federal appellate judges reported owning stock despite the risk that the companies in which they have a financial stake could come before them. By comparison, the proportion of American families who directly own stock is much lower, just 15% as of 2010. That number's actually gone down since then, by the way. Following a Washington Post investigation in 2006, the courts even added a computerized screening process to help judges avoid such conflicts. Yet the problems continue. Guess what? Because they aren't held accountable for it, right? The self-policing is not gonna happen. We're talking about money here. We're talking about their own profit motives, their own financial interests. Unless there are clear consequences for this, they're gonna keep doing it, and they have kept doing it. And by the way, the situation is even worse when you look at members of Congress, because the laws aren't even as stringent for members of Congress. They can invest in individual stocks, as we've talked about before. They do not have to recuse themselves on voting for legislation that would impact the very companies they're invested in. In fact, there's some pretty clear evidence that there's insider trading going on by members of Congress. They get these classified briefings and then, oh, would you look at that? Suddenly, before the entire country knows about the severity of COVID, all these Senate lawmakers are selling certain stocks, buying certain stocks that have to do with at-home or remote work. Oh, well, so weird. How could that be? Could it be that they had a closed-door briefing on COVID and then made some decisions about their portfolio? No, but I bet not. I bet that they have money managers and they never, ever know what the money manager invests their money in. Because that's how people think, right? People are just like, oh, I don't know, here's millions of dollars. I'm not gonna ever check on it or see what I'm invested in. And by the way, part of the problem is what district judges make, okay? They don't make that much money considering they're federal judges. Federal district judges draw an annual salary of $218,600, which isn't much more than a first-year attorney at a top-tier law firm. Some judges said that their salary level makes stock investments an attractive option. Listen, if it was up to me, I would increase their salaries significantly, okay? And I would ban them from owning individual stocks. Like, I don't know, oh, I'm gonna hope that they recuse themselves. No. You wanna invest in mutual funds? Fine. No individual stocks, period. Period. Do you wanna be a public servant or not? Because that's what a government job is supposed to be. And in this case, these games, the law breaking by judges, people who are supposed to enforce the law, is so egregious, so disgusting. And really, it just, this story embodies a lot of what's wrong in our political system. Corruption, profit motive. We see it over and over again in every branch of government, and I'm sick of it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.